and welcome to another edition of Answers Network. I'm your host, Alan Cardoza, and each week this show will address many ways of creating greater health, joy, and love for you and your family. We will introduce you to top professionals and talented authors who are working to make this world a better place for all of us. Now, I'd really appreciate it if you could all do me a big favor. Please forward one of our shows to your social media group and to someone you know who can benefit from today's subject. This is one powerful way that we can make a positive difference together. And I guarantee you, once you start hearing this show, you'll realize we all can benefit from this show. Now, I also want you all to know that I am grateful that you take your time to listen to or now watch this show, and especially those that send in questions, comments, and reviews. Now, please remember, this show exists for you. Now, if you haven't gotten your free copy of the Attitude of Gratitude Journal yet, please go to our website at Answers.network and download a copy. Give it 21 days and comment on whatever platform you listen to us on, what focusing on gratitude has meant for you and your loved ones. Now, many of you have heard me talk about my belief that the key to our growth as a society is proper education. And I've added that what we need more of than any new gadget that's out there is people that are well educated in life to become leaders. Well, our guest today may just have the answers to what we need. J.W. Wilson is the executive director of the Learning Code Institute, an organization which researches, develops, and implements scientific-based learning programs. J.W. is also the author of the soon-to-be-published book, Cracking the Learning Code, the accumulation of over 20 years of scientific research into how to accelerate our learning code and enhance its effectiveness. Now, the key findings is that each one of us has a genetically implanted learning code, which must be turned on before we can create long-term memory and behavioral change. JW's passion, and in fact his crusade, is to bring this essential knowledge to the world. Now, he has developed and managed many businesses, including corporate training firms serving Fortune 500 clients such as IBM and AT&T. In the 90s, JW was president of one of the largest leading accelerated learning companies in the world. He has owned the largest magazine marketing development firm in the Pacific region, developed the country's only holistic treatment center accredited by the prestigious Joint Hospital Commission, and has produced over 1,000 television shows and commercials. His diverse background and level of excellence has placed him in who's who in medicine and healthcare, who's who in science and engineering, who's who in finance and industry, who's who in America, and who's who in the world. JW, welcome to the who's who of Answers Network.
You are the leading guy in who's who. You are the guy for answers. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, it is my pleasure. I'm so glad that you could be with us, and I just really want to jump into it in the sense that we've got 50 minutes. I think that there is so much that I want to be able to go into. But I think maybe to jump right in with the fact that you say that learning is not an event like reading a book or taking a test, which obviously is what our education system seems to think it is. But it's a process like how a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Can you explain that one?
Yeah, it is. Thank you very much. And by the way, our book is out. It's only been out a couple of weeks, but it's up.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And so let me kind of go to the problem. The problem is, where did the educational system start? Not only did we research the 6,000 genes that control neurological function, but what we researched was how do we get to a point where we've developed learning systems where 66 to 80% of people are not very happy with their life, and almost 66% of people to 70% are living paycheck to paycheck. So we needed to look at not only the biological systems that were creating learning, but we had to look at the biological, what was causing it, so that we weren't getting from our learning systems what we want. And we went back to Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates, which are really the basis and the foundation of today's learning programs. Any school you go into, somebody stands in a room and talks to you. That's basically what the scholastics were doing back in the Greek time. And that's what we still do in general, in the majority of schools, unless they're experiential-based schools. And corporate training. I ran a corporate training company, and basically we had a game to help people learn accounting. We didn't sit down and do balance sheet and operating statement. We used a process to get them to transform. And it was pretty phenomenal. We ended up selling that company to DuPont training division. But what we found in doing the research was we've got a huge mistake or misunderstanding that learning is an event. You read a book, you take a test, you do those kind of things, and you've learned. What we found was that that's not really true at all. As you said in the beginning, caterpillars become butterflies, seeds become flowers, coal turns into diamond with the right amount of pressure. It's really carbon turns into coal, into diamonds. But really, when we go back into nature, there's no real transformation that long-lasting transformation that doesn't go through some sort of process. And what we found was because we relied on Plato and Aristotle, we rely on this event-based learning. Think about the seminar you went to 5 seminars ago, Alan. How much do you really remember?
Very little.
Yeah. And that's a thing called neural knockout. What happens is you have a working memory here in the front part of your temple. It's called the lateral prefrontal cortex. And as information is coming in about every 3 to 7 minutes, it takes in the information. If it's meaningful enough, it sends it back to long-term memory. Working memory is electrical and chemical. It's just there for a little bit of time. Long-term memory is structural change at the level of synapses and neurons. So the question is, if you're not able to get the information from working memory, electrical, chemical, back to structural, basically it's not working. And what we found from the research was, we've been doing this research for 35 years. We have a thing called neural knockout. Sorry, I didn't realize my email stuff was on here. And so what we found was that what was happening was, as you keep loading in information over an hour of a webinar, if you don't allow that information to go back into the long-term memory, it literally knocks it out. Even the people watching today, you may get some energy and excitement out of this, and you may get 1 or 2 things that you'll remember, but most of it's going to be gone. And, that's why I want you to everybody here can see in our book more detailed how that happens. But what we found was that really you needed a process of transformation from working memory to long-term memory that changed the neural structures in long-term memory. So what we did was we started to develop programs that were only 3 to 7 minutes long that people would do. You could go online. We have right now, the first one we have coming out within a month or 2 is called Cracking the Learning Code for Homeschool Parents. How to use neuroscience to help your child be number one in what it needs to learn. And what we found from this was that if we were able to slow down the information into working memory, not jam more information and knock it out, because every 7 minutes, if you don't let it go back to long-term memory, it gets knocked out. That's why all of us forget what's in those seminars or webinars. So what we do is, the user only has to go on for 3 to 7 minutes, and then basically we have them do something in the real world. And this is tied into this, because learning is a process, not an event. There are 4 stages of the learning process. Alan, I forgot. Do you have children?
Yes, I do.
Okay. What's your youngest child's name now?
Blaze.
Okay. When Blaze was young, you said, Blaze, don't touch the stove. What did Blaze do?
Of course, he touched it.
Exactly. That's what we do as humans, right? So the information that the stove, and there's 4 stages of this process, this transformational process in the brain: information, action, feedback, and incubation. Let me do the first 3 first. So information is only one stage. This is where the school system focuses. But what happens is if you're only using information and you load more information into working memory, you just keep knocking it out, knocking it out, knocking it out. And you can go to our website and see we've got videos scientifically of how that's happening. So what we found was really very interesting. If you then got the information, like Blaze walked past the stove and it was warm, then what? Well, he went out and said, wow, let me see what's going on here. And they reached out and physically touched the stove with their hand. Mm-hmm. That's action. And right. Then after they touched it, what happened?
Well, I mean, they pulled, obviously they pulled back.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
They got burned.
Right.
And so what happened was they got feedback. So each one of those three systems, actions, information, action, and feedback, are all driven with a thing called monoamines, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. And the more you can up these they're the neurotransmitters not only of joy and happiness, they're the neurotransmitters of focus and attention and the juice you need to create a memory. So as you're doing these three stages, basically the brain then is creating the fertilizer that lets the learning stick. Now, fascinating thing is, if the feedback isn't right away, if the feedback's for a day later or something else, Blaze would have never gotten the feedback needed to attach it to the action so they could get the learning. I've got all sorts of research in corporations where things don't work because the feedback is too far away, right? You tell somebody to do something and then the feedback, you finally go in to help them and they've already gone off in a total other direction because they haven't gotten immediate feedback. So once you get those three systems activated, you've jacked up working memory. But now something has to happen. To get the information from working memory back to long-term structural change. What has to happen is a period of incubation. It's just like having a baby. This is basically what the incubation stage of learning is, very different chemically than the other ones. Let's say the Blaze touched the stove, wandered off, their brain would have naturally dropped into spindles of alpha, theta, and delta waves. These are very slow waveforms in the brain that helps integrate information into long-term memory that's driven by a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. So when you meditate, go into relaxed states or daydream, this is why we need children to daydream. If they're really integrating information. You probably saw that in your children. They're wandering around. What they're doing is they're integrating the information they got in the information, action, and feedback stages. So what we found was there was no system in the world that created learning based on the neurobiology of a process. It was all information delivery. And then you had neural knockout all day long. You go all day long to 8 classes or 6 classes if you're a kid. You get math, you get history, you get English, bang, 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 neural knockout. That's why it's so stressful and why you got to do so much homework. So, and it's the same thing in corporate America. So anyway, we developed these systems that you can go to our website and see, because we put them up so people can understand it. And so what happens is we only train people how to transform their behaviors, their actions, and to get greater learning and memory by putting them into a process of transformation where they literally physically do something in the real world for only 3 to 7 minutes a day. And then we get the neurological structure change in long-term memory.
Now, I learned something many, many years ago, and so I just want to see if this is somewhat connected to it. But the training was based on the fact of determining if we were more visual, audible, or kinesthetic learners. And what they found out in that particular group was that you needed all of them. Or you gained the most if you had all of them. But it sounds like the kinesthetic part of this is what's reinforcing it or passing it into long-term memory. Is that close?
Close. So what we found in the research was there's about 11 biological dominances. There's preferences that those in our species has. Now, remember, evolutionary biology is a big part of this learning code science. So we had to go back 6 billion years to figure out how the brain was built, right? The human brain was built to understand how it operated. You couldn't start now. You had to go back and see, well, how did it get built? Well, as you might have heard before, a guy named McLean in the 50s and 60s came up with a thing called the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and then the neocortex. Well, what we found was that in the brain, what the brain needed to have learning was, even though you might have a preference to learn music, and let's go back to where these preferences came from. When we lived in groups of 25 or 50, somebody had to be really good at finding where the water was. Somebody had to be good at putting two rocks together and starting a fire. Somebody had to get up in the morning really early and looking for the woolly mammoth or something to eat while, everybody else was still asleep. Those are the ADHD kids that we give Ritalin to now, right? We drug them but they were one of the part of the brain plans that really helped our species survive. So what we found was, when we looked back at the human development, when we lived in groups of 25 to 50, there were about 11 biological preferences that we tended to have that allowed us to lean one way or another, towards music, towards action, towards words, whatever. Now, but what we found was, by trying to reduce it down to teaching through the research on these multiple intelligences that Howard Gardner really he wrote a book called Multiple Intelligences back in the 90s and 80s. He came up with this theory. What we found was, teaching to an intelligence didn't really work very well. The research was very weak on it. Now, what it did was, it helped us understand that children and humans are different, and we all learn a little different way. But when we went back into the research, what we found was, you really didn't have to teach to one of the dominances. All you had to do was create a system that fired more neurons. So a guy named Donald O'Hebb from Canada discovered a thing it's now called the Hebbian synapsual learning rule, which is the primary learning rule in neuroscience. And what it simply means is, the more neurons that fire, the more learning that happens. So as long as I can give you the information, take you through the action and the feedback stage, and then let you incubate on that information, let the brain go into alpha and theta, then the information is going to naturally select back. So it doesn't mean we won't have preferences in our lives that are genetically wired that force us to kind of look towards music or pictures or those kinds of things first. But we don't really need to reduce the learning down to that. As long as we take them through those 4 sections, they're naturally going to select in the information on that, because you don't have a choice. When you're going through a process, you invoke the Hebbian learning rule, which means the more neurons that fire, the more learning that happens.
So would this be why many people tend to, or maybe all of us, tend to remember more traumatic events, because we're actually firing more neurons at the time in which that traumatic event is happening?
Yes. Now, just think about this. Do you remember your last history class?
No.
Okay. Do you remember your first kiss?
Yes.
That's it. Which one fired more neurons? It's simple. It's dog ass simple.
Yeah.
But we don't have learning. We make you sit in the classroom, not move for 16, or depending on how long you're in school, at least 12 years, sit still, don't talk, don't move, listen to me, study, memorize, take tests. And here's the problem with tests. So you take a test, right? You stay up all night, memorize, you drink Red Bull, you drink coffee, you freak yourself out, you take the test. Really, within 3 to 6 days, how much, and some people a little longer, depending if they're word dominant, or left temporal lobe, which is word dominant, they can last a little longer, up to 6 weeks. But in general, within 6 to 7 weeks, how much of that information did you really remember?
Well, and not much. And in fact, it actually reminds me is that when I traveled a lot more in business, I went to a lot of other countries. And so what I would do, there was a place here locally, I forget the name of it now, but anyway, it was a learning center where they hypnotized you and took you through a new language. And then they gave me, and this is how long ago it was, cassette tapes.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember that. Very well.
Cassette tapes, and then you take those home and you listen to them as you fall asleep. And I would do that for about 6 weeks prior to working a case in another country. And what I found was, I was understanding a language, and I didn't fully know why I understood it, but I did. I could speak it enough to get by, but
fascinating.
5 or 6 weeks after I was finished with that case and I was back home, I retained almost none of it.
Yeah, it's hard. Now, some of it may come back if you went back to that country. So
Yes.
here's what happened to you. So we can learn something. It can be usable for a short period of time. the synapsual buds can then be either grown or activated or connected up with other synapsual buds. These are the little buds on the end of dendrites, these connections between neurons that basically hold learning. This is kind of it's a little more complex than that, but it's kind of what they do. So what happens is when you came home, those receptor sites didn't really go away. They just receded back into the neuronal wall. If you went back into that country and started to try to learn it again, slowly they'd start popping back out again. I lived in Africa and I spoke an African language called Wolof. Really okay, I could survive, right? And I was a coach, and I have a friend of mine who's really into it. Most of my people weren't coaches that I met over there that were Americans. They were farmers, and he was a farmer, agriculture guy, and he is a linguistic dominant. He remembers everything. I'm a spatial dominant, where I try to put things together in a frontal dominant or relational. And so my word dominant side sucks. But when I talked to him about the Wolof word, I couldn't pull anything out of my head. But the minute I start talking to him in Wolof, they all start popping back out. Now, it may take time. So it doesn't necessarily go away. And it's like trauma, like what you said, traumatic learning. Because what you did was experiential: information, action, feedback, incubation. And the other advantage you had is you were using the words to learn how to survive, to get more food, to help more people, solve more crimes, or whatever it was you were doing. So there was meaning attached to it. So that was a real gift for you. So it really isn't gone. If you go back to those countries, over time, they'll start coming out. It's different for each one of us, how fast, some faster than others.
No, and you're absolutely right. When I have gone back, it has surprised me that we went back not with the intent of needing it, but more just, for vacation or something. It is a little bit surprising when all of a sudden I start realizing that I'm understanding. So yes, I couldn't agree more. One of, I talk about it on the show. One of my pet peeves is the whole issue of our process, our educational system now. What do we as a society have to do to make changes, to get change to be dealt with on a much higher level?
Yeah. Well, and this is why it took us 35 years to do the research. What happened was, what I found was, when I went out and looked at the research, the things that stuck and changed the world, Newton's work. He wrote a book called The Principia. It was a weighty thing. There were other things, even Darwin's Survival of the Species, at the time, very weighty. What I found was there's some really great books out there, like The 1 Minute Manager, Who Moved My Cheese, those type of books that they make a little bit of action in the world, and then they go away. And what I found was the authority wasn't strong enough. The information wasn't strong enough. So our strategy at the Learning Code Institute was to really do two things. One, develop the definitive manual based on science about how we learn. Our book has over 1,300 footnotes. And it's a big book. It's like 700 pages long. But we made it so you only have to read 15 or 20 pages of every chapter to get what you need. We have an icon that says you can either skip if you got enough information, or you can go deeper. We got a little dive guide that says you can go deeper into the science. But what we found was, without an authoritative piece, without a foundational piece that the world could refer to, what we did was we just kept reaching out and pulling things together. When I worked in the school systems, oh my God, it is so stressful. Because I don't know if you know this, but every year, any of the teachers that are listed here sees it. We see it in corporate America, but not quite so much. Here is the new flavor that we're going to do this year in school. And they have some expert come in. He delivers the new flavor to the teachers before the year happens, or during the year. And then the next year they try something else because that didn't work so good. So basically it's over and over and over again. And mainly what I found is because, not that these strategies weren't good. The problem was that they weren't weighty enough. So we go, oh, I got to follow that. So what we tend to do, we have genes in us that we call this is our term for them, alpha influencer genes. And when you find people in your life that are alpha influencers, now I don't want to get into politics, but some people see Biden as a alpha influencer. Some people see Trump. The minute you see somebody as an alpha influencer and you think that person can enhance your personal thriving or surviving, you literally select in, the genes turn on that force you to select in the information faster. I mean, I have friends that love Trump and they know everything he talks about. If they did as well.
Right. We are talking about the learning code. We are talking to J.W. Wilson. We're going to take a break. J.W., when we come back, want to ask you a little bit about the documentary, The Social Dilemma, because it sounds like they're using some of these same techniques, but maybe not necessarily to our benefit. So for everybody, stay with us. We'll be right back. You're listening to Answers Network.
Founded over 30 years ago to meet the needs of families in crisis, West Shield has continually focused on resolving issues that negatively impact families and businesses. Our signature therapeutic transportation service helps to ensure that adolescents in crisis are safely transported to specialized schools, programs, and treatment centers with unsurpassed experience and success. We are supported by our full-service licensed investigation agency that has legally, professionally, and compassionately located hundreds of runaways and teens. We are experienced and qualified to help, offering solutions which may include referrals to our international network of top professionals in the fields of educational consulting, psychology, psychiatry, and investigations. Simply put, West Shield Adolescent Services and West Shield Investigations are the best solutions when your family is facing a personal crisis. Call 1-800-899-8585, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's 1-800-899-8585, or visit our website at westshield.com. Thank you.
And we're back. We are talking about the learning code. When we're talking about the brain, and we're talking about how we can take information and take it from our short-term memory and put it in our long-term memory. So, JW.
Can I interrupt you, Alan, just real quick?
Sure.
You had that ad on there for West Shield.
Yes.
I need to say, if we can get to our children soon enough when they're in crisis and get them the support they need. Literally, most of these children are acting out because their environmental, whether it's familial or whether it's other sort of environment, the hood. Mm-hmm. Basically it's forcing their brain structures to either resist or adapt to that particular environment. What we found was the sooner that you can do the intervention and the more compassionate at some level the intervention, the greater the neurological structure. Even if the intervention is very dogmatic, that right and wrong, you got to walk in these boundaries. As long as there's love there and compassion there, the brain activates the neurochemicals that accelerates the learning. And just so everybody knows, it works. Now, I don't usually talk about this much, but I've been in jail 5 times, in prison once when I was a kid. I was a mess. My house was a mess. My parents were drug addicts, alcoholics. It was a nightmare. But with the right intervention, which I had, thank God, most people would have written me off a long time ago. A lot of people did. But it was people like you that are creating things like this, Alan, that really are giving the compassionate foundation for us to transform those. A kid is a delinquent. The only reason a kid is a delinquent is because he's in friggin' pain. Mm-hmm. And he's trying to alleviate it some way. And I just want to say how grateful I am for what you're doing at West Shield and all the people that you work with there. And how I wished I'd have had that when I was 15 instead of military school.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And that's one of the reasons why we like to talk about this is that there is so many incredible programs out there that people don't know about. Yes. And in fact, that was the reason 12 years ago for me to start this show. Was I was speaking to so many parents whose child was in crisis, or who had run away, or who was in jail or in juvenile hall, and they didn't know what was available to them. And I thought, I'm spending all of my time, one parent at a time, trying to tell them, oh, here's what's available to you. And I realized I'm not going to make a dent. But if I can start something like this, so that was actually what you're talking about is what caused this show to start. So thank you for that.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
All right. So many people are aware of the documentary, The Social Dilemma. And they talk about that, that they are utilizing some of the same tools that you're talking about within our brain, but they're using it for their benefit, to manipulate things to where, like clickbait and things like that, to where they're constantly, trying to keep you on. And one of them says, one of the things I think said, that they make 3.4 cents if they can get you to click one more time every time they can get that. And if they can do that with 300 million people, they're just making more and more money. But it also talks a lot about, when you mentioned, when you were talking about the difference between the two leaders, and you said that, that people will focus more once they think that person is, and I think you called them, that they're alpha influencers.
Alpha influencers.
They seem to be pushing this button to where once they think they know who your alpha influencer is, they push more and more information to you that they believe you will synergize with, that will keep you online longer, and sometimes take you further and further out on the ledge, with things that it's as if they're not really concerned with the fact if the information is accurate, and in fact, the fake information actually keeps you on longer. So let's talk about that a little bit, because again, you've studied the brain. Does this, what's your thoughts on this?
Okay, that's really interesting. So the brain selects in on meaning. So if my son's a musician, we went to a wedding and he was already checking out all the instruments and talking to the guys playing, the music. I could have cared less, right? I'm over, talking to the pretty girls, right? the bridesmaids. And so we tend to select, and remember the brain, we can talk about a little bit, is a selective organ. It selects in on what's already meaningful to it. Okay. This is why, Polish like sausage and the Japanese like sushi, but the environment. So the brain kind of comes in a bit naked. Mm-hmm. There's some things that you're born with, like how to suckle, you're pre-programmed with your genes, how to walk and talk, but you're also programmed with your brain structures to select in as quick as it can from the environment it's in, because it'll help it survive. So we're really not born Jewish or Hindu or Buddhist. What we become it because it's like taking a clean cloth, dropping it in dye, and you pull it out, and it's a little blue. You dye it a little more, and it gets bluer and bluer and bluer, and eventually it's the same color as the dye. Same thing happens to your brain. That's why Polish are Polish, Czechoslovakians are Czechoslovakians, and Swedish are Swedish. It's where we dip their neural structures. Now, they may look a little different, color of skin and those kind of things. Depending, you're born up north, you need more vitamin D, so your skin's got to be lighter. You're born down south, you got to be a little darker because you don't want to fry because there's more sun down there, right? Mm-hmm. So what we found is, because the brain is a selective organ, it selects in on meaning. But what we do is, and where does meaning come from? Well, you're born with these structures and make certain things meaningful to you, like music or art or those kind of things. But also things in your environment become meaningful to you. We were just in North Carolina, and barbecue was meaningful to everybody. There was barbecue places. I live in Boulder, Colorado. I think there's one barbecue place in the whole town, right? So what happens is we select in on what's already meaningful to us. But if we don't have something that's meaning, and if you can attach what's already meaningful to someone to a cause like Republican or Democrat, and you do it effectively, then they become one with that. So what's happening is and it's not, nobody's wrong. Nobody's a bad Republican or a bad Democrat. They're just a Democrat or a Republican that is basically selected in information that caused their structures to grow. And when the structure starts to grow in that particular arena, it's like a magnet. It attracts more and more stuff to it. So if you get somebody off on a wrong track that it's not true, like a lot of the forced stuff on the web, but it's exciting and it's meaningful to you, and you go down that rabbit hole then builds the neurological structures that are like fats and proteins. It's like cheddar cheese. It's sticky, gooey stuff. It's like fats and proteins in there that literally attract more things like it. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, even if the information's wrong. Mm-hmm. But here's the problem. The person is forced almost to focus his dopamine and his norepinephrine on what's that wrongness. And when that wrongness is there, it's selecting in structures into the brain that makes it hard for him to get rid of it. That's why I don't want to get political here. Whether you like Donald Trump or not, 70% or something of the Republicans like the guy. Whether he's a crook or not, it doesn't really they can't literally see it, because everything, once you have the structures built, everything you see from that individual, that organization, or that alpha, then gets filtered through your structures. So literally, once you take a side, this is really interesting, you can't see reality anymore.
Exactly. Thank you. And that's my belief as well.
It's science.
Yeah. And yes. And it's so funny that the arguments now over so many different things have to do with science, obviously with COVID and things like that. And yet you have two different sides saying, we're showing you the science, and it's completely different. It's completely opposite. Right. And then people will argue their point and say, well, but it's because we're following the science. And I've tried to tell people, look, just go spend a couple of weeks and just listen to the other side for a while, and you'll realize that they believe they're just following the science too.
And you're right. And the problem, though, is here's the problem. Once you build up a set of structures that you think is going to increase your personal thriving or surviving because you joined your group, Republican, Democrat, mm-hmm. Buddhist, Hindu, whatever. Literally, when new information comes in, the brain resists it. It says, I've already got what I need to thrive and survive, so I want to get more of it. Even if you're thriving and surviving isn't very good. Even if you're living not where you want to live or as happy as you want to be.
Okay. Well, so with how much, how divisive things have gotten now, how long does it take now? I can remember learning that they said if you take 21 days, you can add a new. I talked about it one time about it being like our brain is a snow-capped mountain, and we have certain runs that we've been doing with our skis the whole time. Good. Does it take 21 days to do a new path? How long does it take for us to get a new path and for enough snow to come down to fill up the old path so that our skis don't automatically kick over to that same path again over and over and over again? So
at the Institute, we're apolitical. All we want to do is change the way the world's learning so everybody can have more joy, fulfillment, and
exactly
and connection in the world. Really, I mean, think about it. We've been killing each other for 6 million years. I mean, can't we get over that?
Yeah.
Let's not keep using the same systems, right? So but to come to what the question is, just say what you think the question is in one sentence with a question mark at the end, if you can. Let me just see if I can nail it.
Okay. How long, approximately, how long does it take to create a new habit or belief that has been cemented in differently prior to that?
You got it. Okay. So what we've done is we've attached things to time rather than neural activity.
Okay.
If I can get your neural activity, like when your son touched the stove, when Blaze touched the stove, Blaze is a boy?
Yes.
Yeah. When he touched the stove, he got the feedback that was the Hebbian learning rule. A lot of neurons got fired, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 21 days of memorizing something. I got great research on preachers that have said the same psalm every day for 20 years. And you take and they've read it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I take it away from them, and it may be a page long. I say, repeat it back to me. They can't do it, right? And the main reason is the words weren't enough. So what we need to do, it's just not even though they repeated it for 20 some years, it's not necessarily the repetition. It's two things that are important. One, how meaningful is the information to them? The higher the meaning, the greater the learning. It's really very simple. So if I said to you, Alan, I have the one thing that you need to know to make sure that no child will ever again be a juvenile delinquent, and immediately your dopamine, serotonin, your eyes dilate, your galvanic skin response changes,
Yep.
You lean forward, your blood pressure, that's because it's meaningful to you, right? So we can change structures really quickly if it's highly meaningful to the individual. Like somebody wants to play basketball. If I say, look, I'm going to show you how to make free throws and you'll never miss again in your life. They're in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the higher the meaning, the greater the learning. So more importantly than the time is the meaning. How meaningful is this? And can I wrap what I want the individual to know into what is already meaningful to them?
Okay. So, and you had also mentioned earlier about action. So let's go back to your one about free throws. And, let's say that basketball is my life and you tell me that you can do that. So I get excited about it. So that's the one part, but isn't the next part is I need to do an action and then start making them?
Exactly.
Yeah. So the action. So as I start making free throws, that's what's going to now give me the whatever muscle memory.
Exactly. And what we wouldn't do it. And we wouldn't start you at the free throw line. I'd start your butt right in front of that basket. And you just go, you make about 100 in a row, and then we'll move you back an inch. Then we make another 100. With some of the strategies where I was a coach.
Oh, okay.
I was a coach in Africa, basketball, football, a lot of crazy stuff, track. And so what happens is we try to get them to learn too quickly. We got to remember the brains, we're creating new neurological structures so we can make the basket. And really, we're rearranging some of the ones that already exist. So there's going to be resistance to something new in there. So the easier we can make it at the beginning, it's like threading a needle when you want to sew. You got to thread the needle, start slow, and eventually you got to quilt. But you can't start with the quilt. And that's what we do a lot in all our education. I mean, you go to algebra and a guy writes X plus Y equals Z on the board. Okay, guys, we're going to learn algebra, and it's not connected to anything.
Yeah. Nor can we usually get excited enough because we can't envision what we're going to use it for in the future.
There's no meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're a mathematical preference, which is about 5% of the population, 3 to 5%, unless you've got a set of structures, you go into math class and go, what am I in here for? Maybe math is okay, but you get into algebra and in geometry and some of these other ones, you don't even know why you're there.
I just got an idea, and we mentioned Blaze earlier, and Blaze was one of those that he ended up going to a school called Fusion Academy that did an incredible job, but what they focused on was learning to learn. Okay, so it wasn't memorize this particular thing, but learn how to learn.
Yeah.
And I'm imagining that is obviously reworking his brain to where, because he said after that, when he then went on to college and such, it was, wow, this stuff's actually pretty easy once he learned how to learn.
Right.
So that part was great. So if a learner goes through all 4 of your stages,
they're not my stages.
Well, of your code, of the learning code that is in the book. But I'm saying if we go through those 4 stages, will our brain change to the point that we will that ability will become easier and easier for us to do it on so many other things?
So let me go back to what you said about Blaze in the school. They weren't. He wasn't learning how to learn. Think about it. A child, depending on the environment they grow in, the environment that dip in that white rag in the blue in the blue dye, depending on how rich the environment is, a child will learn between 30 and 75 to 100,000 words by the time they're 7. They did that without ever memorizing, without ever taking a test, without doing anything. They just learned the words to get more of what was already meaningful to them. So what happens is we're not teaching them how to learn. They're not learning. They already know how to learn. We're just turning on the code within them that allows them to do it more naturally. Because the school system, think about it. We take a kid who just learned 30 to 100,000 words by the time they're 7. We put them in a classroom. We tell them to shut up, don't move, and don't do what you're doing to learn 100,000 words. What? It's just crazy.
Yeah.
So to come back to the answer to your question is that we don't really need to learn how to learn. We already know how. We just have to understand that it's already in us and how to turn it on. And that's what our book and our online programs do at the Learning Code Institute. So really our goal is educating the masses or the world so we don't keep using systems that don't give us what we need in our life.
All right. And I just glanced over. We're about to run out of time. First of all, I want to say, can we do this again? Because we didn't have nearly enough time. Actually, we needed the 5 hours I wanted to begin with. Okay.
I'd love to. Well, helping kids really is, that's, I was so friggin' damaged when I was younger. All I want to do is help more children. Even though we're cracking the marketing code and doing all these other things in marketing, cultural change, really children, if we can help our children get this younger and be satiated and be joyful and select in what's already, meaning to them, we can change this world from the bottom up.
I love it. And again, so yes, so I'm going to hold you to that.
Run here.
To have you back. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you or to the website or to get the book? What is the best way?
You can get the book on Amazon. It's Cracking the Learning Code. And then you can go on, we've got special things. We only launched it a few weeks ago. And then you can go on to our website, thelearningcode.com, THE. You put the in front of it or you'll learn how to do coding. And so go to the Learning Code. We've got a lot of videos on there right now. Everybody that's watching, I really suggest you go there now. And even if you buy the ebook for $4, the way we've got it, that you're going to get so much from this that no matter where you are, whether you're helping children, whether you're in corporations, whether you're a teacher, wherever you are, and you want to make a difference in your own life, you'll start seeing why all the stuff that you've been doing before that wasn't working the way you wanted it to didn't work, and what you need to do to change it. It's, and the more people we can get to do it, we create an army and we can transform this world.
I love it. I love it. So speaking of transforming the world, we've just got about another minute. If I handed you this magic wand here and you could do one thing right now, what is that you would do?
Well, to be honest, I'd have people get that book. And
go.
Read the first, 10 pages of every chapter and take your time. If it takes you a year, I don't care, because every time you read, trust me, the people that have already got it, it's not me saying this. They say just reading a few pages literally transforms the way they're looking at everything that deals with that particular vertical. So we broke how you learn into like 30 elements, and real quickly you'll get them.
All right. So for everybody out there, so not only get the book, but get a few of them, give them to your loved ones. This is how we're going to make a positive difference. That's what this show is about. JW, thank you so much for coming on, and look forward to having you back on as soon as possible.
Alan, thank you very much. And I thank you so much for what you do for the world. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Now for everybody out there, okay, please join us next Monday when we are joined by Tracy Dunsblazer to discuss his new book, Conquering Karma, Heal Spiritual Trauma to Open Your Heart and Restore Your Soul. Now, as JW said, go to his website, check out if you have questions, give it to them. But also go to our website, go to our archives. It's Answers.network. Check out some of the past interviews. It's all free. Same thing with the Attitude of Gratitude book. It's free. Go there, check it out, subscribe to the show, and let us know how we're doing. And If you like what you hear, leave a review or forward it on to someone that you love, that you want to see make a positive difference in their life. So for everybody out there, be good human beings and be with us again next week on Answers Network.
Hello, I'm Marty Cove. You might remember me from roles such as Sensei in the Karate Kid films. I've done over 100 films and countless stunts in my career, and I've always given 100%. With the damage done to my body over time, I needed to find relief from my chronic pain. My passion for health and fitness drove me to find a natural way to combat muscle pain. Teaming up with doctors, detectives, and a compounding pharmacist, we've created Marty's Cobra Cove Ultra Strength CBD Cream. It's the only thing that has been strong enough to knock out my pain, and fast. Honestly, you may have tried the rest, but it's time to try the best. It's legal, it's safe, and 100% effective. Show your pain, no mercy. Go to www.martyscobracove.com.
You're listening to Answers Network with Alan Cardoza, only on LA Talk Radio.